This is such a pleasure to be here. I think to be the speaker after lunch is always a challenge. So I will try hard to keep you interested and will break often so you can ask questions. I thought I'll start a bit of sobering news and a personal news. My husband works for Google. So it was really interesting when there's this solution called Google Compare, which allows you to compare insurance premiums online. Has anybody used Google Compare for flights or anything with a show of hands? Right. Did you know that Google Compare for insurance is wrapping up? They are closing that service down, as they did with something called Google Health. Anybody remembers Google Health? You don't, because they closed down. I wanted to start with a bit of a sobering news around technology to say that the biggest technology players can fail. So the opportunity is not to say that technology in itself will succeed, but how to use the business intelligence that insurance players and aggregators have so that they can leverage technology to succeed. One without the other will not succeed. Even Google can fail. I would prefer that. Is that, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so that's okay. Okay, so we keep talking about how technology is disruptive. What is affected? There are two types of changes that we will see. One will be market movements, and those are transformative. We will see that the whole economy and models of aggregation will change, and that's where we'll see disruption. The other is much more a day-to-day business, and that's expanding insurance. I suggest that as you think of, as insurers or aggregators, as you think of collaborating with tech players or bringing in technology within your company, you think of both the models. I think the initial effort is always to see how technology can be leveraged to just expand your present business. But please be anxious and forewarned that the business in itself is changing. Let's talk about what are the areas of intervention. Where do you want to use technology? I divide that into three categories. One is just distribution. We heard about a lot from Peter as well as Gustav and the other speakers that mobile is an interesting way of aggregating or low-cost distribution. However, technology in itself, both mobile as well as the internet, and just the culture of using such solutions has meant that there are other distribution models through which we could serve. I'll talk about both peer-to-peer to reach out middle-income, high-income, as well as low-income Colombians. And then we'll talk about pay-as-you-use. Now, that's an interesting model, and I will have an interesting Colombian example there. So we'll have one of the attendees here speak about that a bit. Then the back office. This is one critical part of paper management. If you talk about insurance, a lot of the concerns, even for people like us, is just the sheer amount of car insurance, home insurance, multiple insurance, paper management, not knowing if I'm fully covered, managing all the claims processing, and for insurers to manage the multiple partners that they have, be it the broker, be it the agent. If you're providing health, then the hospital network and the TPA. Is there a way we can use technology to get those relationships managed better? So we are prepared to provide more transparent solutions and also manage our portfolio better. And I think while a lot of the talk about technology in insurance or InsurTech, which in some sense has become the biggest in this fiscal year, Bay Area investments in new technology, InsurTech and FinTech is higher than any other investment area. But if you see where the money is going, it's not as much in distribution models as much as disrupting the inefficiencies in core insurance management, which is this piece, the back office piece. So I anticipate this being the core of the challenge that you need to address. And the third is really new products. And I'll give you examples of, we all believe that we have been giving interesting customized products, but I'll show you a few examples of new players, as new as 1 year old, who are able to give individualized products to the degree of 100 new products in, say, just pet insurance. And I know that that seems like a not so popular insurance, but that's the degree of customization possible. And the third and the most interesting bit will be wearables. And this is a bit out there. Is there anybody here who uses a Fitbit? A Fitbit? You know? No? The Apple Watch, the Samsung Watch. A lot of these wearables have come in as a fashion statement. And I don't think initially insurers were thinking of it as any use or any relevance whatsoever. Until, of course, Fitbit got a large investment from an insurance company, a health insurance company, which was dealing with huge population of aging clients who are going to get hospitalized more and more. So they're using wearables in some sense to incentivize clients to become more healthy and make the pool healthier. So my presentation really will be on these themes only. I will not talk a lot about mobile, that has been covered. Let's talk about how to get to the last mile, and specifically the peer-to-peer model. So this is the networking economy. We see more and more households using Airbnb, Uber. So any asset that we had, we are ready to pool it in as a network, and we see these networks being very strong and working. How can insurers leverage this opportunity rather than just think of it as a disruption? So this is the buying power of groups. Now, one of the biggest challenges with expanding the frontiers of insurance has been information asymmetry. I don't know what is the probability of floods happening, or the cattle dying, or this being a reckless driver. And that information asymmetry in some sense forces me to invest in alternate ways for historical data, or to price up. And that's a big challenge that technology helps us address. By leveraging groups, typical groups, and it could be regional groups or client groups. One of the biggest lobbies in the US is this group called the AARP, which in some sense really makes political lobbies, but also influences insurance. The membership of AARP is a group of people who are above 50. So largely senior citizens who are interested in life and health insurance. And they have become a very powerful lobby, and also to negotiate premiums with insurance companies. That's one example. But peer-to-peer groups have become very popular, and in some ways are a big disruptor to the insurance market. So what they typically do is, it can be online groups. It could be literally people who are buying a certain type of car in a certain age group. They come together. It can be any broker or insurer which is bringing them together. It could be an aggregator like MicroInsure, or I forget the other one, Bima, but it doesn't have to be. There are other players. They have nothing to do with insurance in itself, but they are pooling these people, asking them to pay, say, $10 into this pool of the group. In case of any loss, the group pays out to its members. In case of losses beyond what the group has pooled, the agency or the aggregator comes in. So in some sense, what it does, and if there are expenses beyond that, they have an investor pool that they reach out to. This goes back to the roots of where insurance came, which is pooling. What it does, though, is completely circumvent insurance. They don't have to touch insurance companies to be able to offer insurance products. And this is a heads up to regulators, because is this regulatory okay? What if there are frauds in this scenario? So that's one thing that the regulator needs to watch out to. But let's not be smug that the regulator will protect us, because these disruptors are not just an example, they are the big players. And I'm going to show you data of how big the players are. But before that, what does the model really offer? It is really making insurance affordable. And we have data to show that the insurance premiums are collapsing by about 20%. So traditional car insurance that any of us in a regulated, mandated market enjoys these motor insurance premiums, when a competing solution is 20% less, we should be very worried about where that competition is going to go and where your clients will start to move. What it also does is substantially reduces distribution cost. In some sense, you don't have to worry about whether the pool is good or bad. because the pool is forming in itself, they will weed out the good and bad risk. And even if they don't, typically they do, but if they don't, they are paying for it. In some sense, a peer-to-peer insurance is really what traditionally we would call what we were not covering as a deductible. Now this is a deductible pool of the members. That's forming. And it definitely addresses our big concern as insurers, which is information asymmetry and adverse selection that we were worried about. When you think of expanding your market, when you think of not really disrupting and transforming, but being lazy to some degree, but still be in the business, this is the first step. Peer-to-peer insurance will really help you expand the frontiers of your membership in an environment where you don't have traditional sources of data about that profile. If you had to cover young people in the age group and you don't have a sense about how they will behave in their driving or ownership of phones or laptops, if you wanted to insure that asset, this is a great way to start. I'm going to stop here to see if you have questions about the model before I start giving you the examples from around the world on this model. You have to ask me questions, otherwise I'll not move forward. Are we good? Okay. Let's look at what's happening around the world. There are two types of models. So initially they started off as brokers doing it. Insurers were agnostic, they're like, brokers are doing this. But there's been so much money and it's been so successful, wildly successful, that there are new insurance companies which have been set up only doing peer-to-peer insurance. And I'll come to those insurance companies in a bit, but let's talk about the guys who started the business in some sense. Anybody heard of Frenchurance other than Alejandra? German organization started in, any guess how many years it started ago? Yeah, 2011, not that old. Now, they are there, they form pools largely around car insurance. People come together and form pools around motor insurance. Now, what you need to be interested in and what the clients are interested in is what it's giving back to the clients. 90% of peer members who joined a Frenchurance group got part of their premium back as reimbursement. The part that I did not mention in the earlier slide is when there are claims, the group pays up. But when there are no claims, the peer group pool, which is traditionally what we would call the deductible amount, is paid back. And that would mean, can anybody tell me as to, is there any insurance company here which has paid back to 10% of their members part premium back? 10%, 5%, 2%? So when you have 90% of a competing model which is paying part of the premium back, you should get up and listen and be very, very nervous. And this Friend Insurance is just the first one. This is the other organization called Bought by Many. Similar platform, is a broker, has insurance contracts at the back end, but really is a very good aggregator. Now, what else does this help? It helps me understand what products to offer. I don't really know, should I offer critical insurance? Should I offer a dental insurance or a cancer insurance? We, as insurers, are not very updated about what the client needs and what the trends are. We are two connections away. But the peer group is a very good manner in messaging to you what are the risks that the clients are facing and what they want cover for. So Bought by Many offers 100 customized products, which is very easy. The group defines what they want cover for. Bought by Many facilitates that to some degree. And here we have 100 customized solutions. For a traditional insurance model, that would be very challenging to offer. Just to manage 100 products customized at the back end for pools as small as, say, 5,000 or 10,000 may not be profitable for you. But just in the city of Bogota, if you had somebody providing this, imagine the competition. And because these models became so successful, we started to see insurance companies being set up exclusively on the peer-to-peer model. And the one that I'm going to talk a little bit about is called Lemonade. The name sounds, and there's a story behind the name. Insurance typically is used, and the experience is like a lemon. really, it's bitter. Can we make a lemonade out of the insurance experience? So that's why lemonade. The other is Uvamo. Now, Uvamo is really interesting because it focuses on, again, an insurance company, raised 15 million in round zero. So it started off with nothing else, just the idea of setting up an insurance company, and people were ready to put money behind it. Just says a lot about us as the insurance industry and the perception about how much inefficiency people think we have, that they're ready to disrupt it so easily. Now, what Lemonade is already doing, and it's so exciting, is already, and they are such new players, so they don't have legacy business, they don't have mandated premiums coming in, and already with their tech efficiency, they're able to give premiums which are 20% less than the market. Imagine what else we could potentially do to compete like this. This is worth watching, getting up and taking note of. Uvamo focuses exclusively on property and casualty. This is other thing that Uvamo does, and I want you to look at, is peer-to-peer, as I have mentioned, is largely at the client level. The clients come together, form a pool. What Uvamo does is also at the end of pooling of capital. Instead of collaborating with the reinsurer, they go to capital players and say, I have 10 type of groups. I have a group of senior citizens, but very healthy pool of senior citizens. I have a pool of motor insurance, and I have a pool for drought in California. You can choose to be the capital reserve for any of this. So in some sense, it is actually disrupting the reinsurance market, regulation in consideration. So what it does is you and I could actually bet on whether after 3 years of drought, there's going to be again a drought, maybe not. And you can come in as an investor to that pool. So that's what Uvamo is doing. Again, already seems to be making profits and not just revenue growth. This is not just true for Germany or the US, as those examples were, and those were really the big ones. Let me show you where else these models are growing. Just quickly, these are the industries. And especially, tell me, from a show of hand, who are the insurers in this room? I'm hoping a majority. How many of you have car insurance products? Patient money comes in, government puts regulation, you don't have to do anything, people have to just buy the insurance. Exciting, right? Also a bit lazy, don't you think? It allows us to be lazy. Clearly, nobody is going to talk to me after the presentation, but that's true. In India, we call ourselves the lazy bankers and the lazy insurers. Because it's mandated business, you don't have to do anything, people will have to buy it. Now think when your predictable revenue and the regulator gets to hear that somebody is able to offer car insurance or real estate insurance at dramatically low prices. That's where the base of your business will start to shake, so please take notice. So can we have my friend from Visura stand up for a second? Should I give you the mic, or can somebody get him the mic? I wanted to give you an example of not just in UK or France or New Zealand or Canada, but really of innovation that's happening in your backyard. Look at him, because he will be killing your market and taking a large chunk of it. But before you speak, I'll just take a second and talk about the other model, which is Riovic in South Africa. Again, it's called the Uber of finance, slightly different from what Visura does. It is, in addition to being a peer-to-peer network, it's an advisory service. Insurance is just one of the solutions they offer. They do peer-to-peer credit, peer-to-peer savings, which started about 10 years ago. Insurance started only 4 or 5 years ago. And of course, we have the Colombians innovating, as always. So over to you. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you can reveal?
Lo que nos puedes contar. My name is Jorge Gomez. I work with Suramericana de Seguros, and after 2014, we have identified that in the digital world, we've started to see a number of businesses that today need to be extrapolated to insurance. In 2015, we started with a project that we conceived as a prototype in Silicon Valley. and we started to develop a platform which is in its beta phase, where we're starting to develop the peer-to-peer insurance business. We started on April 1st in Colombia, and we are starting to have leads and good traffic, where we see that new generations in Colombia are providing a good response to this type of model. As she has said, we have adapted to the business model, to a model that lies within large insurers, not just as a broker. And the idea is to start to test very easy products such as bicycle, cell phone insurance, camera insurance, to start to understand this market that for us is entirely new. That is basically what we're doing today.
Thank you for that. So I just wanted to highlight that this is not merely happening somewhere else, it's happening in your backyard. Thanks to the Innovation Lab. I think they're starting off with a small piece, but as it will expand, I'm sure they'll look at the most obvious market, which is car and motor. And I saw 60% of the room raise their hands when I said car. So if nothing else, start with the most simplest pieces where you can intervene. Can you hear that noise? Okay. Can you? Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm so sorry. So that in some sense is the peer-to-peer. Are there any specific questions you have? I typically don't do conferences, I do workshops, so you have to talk to me. I can't do this one way. So tell me, from a peer-to-peer, from the models out there, from a regulatory point of view, from a design point of view, delivery point of view, from as an insurer or an agent or a broker, what do you think would inhibit you from doing it? What stops Colombia doing it? Fraud? That's a very good point. Any other concerns?
I see that most of these companies that you have shown were not like common insurers, are new companies. I wanted to ask you, how were these companies formalized, or how are they accepted in their regulatory regime or environment?
So I think the reason I started with, I actually told Alejandra that a lot of the technology discussions, the maker or the breaker will really be the regulator. Let me first respond to the question that you asked before I come to fraud. So yes, they started off as very informal groups, simply groups on Facebook actually, which came together, or similar to Facebook, social networks, which came together and started to form pools. But that happened 4 years ago. That was 2011 when Friend Insurance happened. The last 4 companies that I listed, Uvamo, Lemonade, are registered insurance companies in the US. US is a very regulated, painful insurance market. And last night, I saw 2 more companies were registered, got their licenses to operate as health insurance companies in the US. One of them is Ledger. I forget the name of the other. So the question about, is this an informal trend which they are doing illegal things? Well, maybe it was, and they were forming a pool. Has that model been refined to the point that new insurance companies competing with the Cignas or the AIGs are competing and doing much better, are getting registered? Answer to that question is yes. So that's the first question. On the question of fraud, let's look at the, is there anybody else in the room who worries that a peer-to-peer network would lead to a lot of fraud with a show of hands? Are you worried about fraud? Not so much. That's interesting. So you're saying that insurance in some sense is not such a credible business because there is no risk in this business of fraud. So if somebody else who's not as regulated as you does it, there's no risk for fraud? I mean, as an insurer, I would say no. Anybody else doing the business other than me is a fraudster. So, but let's talk about why fraud could be a concern and how it can be addressed. The people who are coming together are paying their premium to the pool in some sense. There can be adverse selection. I can be an unhealthy 70-year-old who's always smoking and I join the pool. because I know that I will claim, but the group will filter itself out in some sense. And if I'm unhealthy and I claim, the group makes the first payout. As an insurer, to some degree, we are blind. We are anticipating that the client will claim that fraud. The other fraud is who protects the client, which is a customer protection issue. There is a group that is there. They have pooled. Now, there's some facility which is like friend insurance. We don't know who they are. May have an insurer at the back end. What if the claims are higher? The accident expectation on the roads of Germany or Bogota was supposed to be 3%, and it became 7%. Who makes a payout? Is that a concern? Now, those organizations at the back end have capital reserves that they have brought in as investors, or they themselves are playing. So that's the value add in some sense. That they are maintaining a risk premium, they get part of the premium, and they're paying it up for reinsurance, so they maintain that facility. On paying back, because they're leveraging so much technology, they typically are leveraging by paying through mobile money at times when the payouts are made. There's not enough study on frauds that have happened, though the feedback is really, because people are so connected, the feedback is pretty obvious. You immediately get feedback when there's bad service. So the question on fraud and regulation and customer protection stands. I hope the regulator takes note of that. Having said that, is this an opportunity to expand? Yes. Is this an opportunity to offer more customized, responsive products? Yes. Is the world around insurance distribution changing? Yes. So we should see more of this. I'll move on to the other model, which is pay as you use. Really, largely around, this is much more, we see much more with companies like Uber or Lyft coming in, or Airbnb coming in, where you are really renting out your space. What happens if I have a home insurance, but I put it on Airbnb and somebody else used? And that's also true for low-income households. When I'm a driver who's renting a car and using it, or if I'm, if I'm a farmer who's renting a tractor, or if I'm renting a boat, what happens when I'm only using it for a certain period and I do not want to pay insurance for the full period? Pay as you use has also expanded, largely in the space of cars. Anybody knows of Metro Mile? Anybody who drives a Toyota car here? Any Toyota cars, right? So a lot of the cars are doing it, but I just wanted to show that it happens both ways. Companies like Metro Mile, the solution is really that at times it's a gadget that you fix to your car, or it's just connected to the odometer of your car. It's called telematics. The moment you start your car, you pay insurance premium for the miles that you use, not when your car is parked. And that means there's substantial reduction in insurance premium for the clients. So the regulator will take notice. Anything that is more efficient, is more affordable to the client, I'm hoping a responsive regulator will take note of it. Now, how do they manage it? What does it mean? When I park a car, I really don't have to pay premium for it meeting with an accident. Unless it's a driverless car, it's not going out of my garage and meeting with an accident, right? So Metro Mile, again, the other product is something that Progressive Insurance launched called Snapshot. Again, tracks the car, but more interestingly, Metro Mile was simply a solution which lets the driver, the moment you start your car, it starts to insure you. And for every mile that you drive, you pay, say, an upfront $5 as premium. And once you start driving, you pay X cents for every mile you drive. And when you're not driving, you don't pay that. However, Snapshot went a step further. They actually started to incentivize good behavior. They saw that truckers would be very sleepy and they would meet with accidents, and that made the insurance very costly for the insurer. So they started to create mobile-based updates so that the driver would not be distracted. Now, while it seems like a small intervention, let's step back and see what it really is. In addition to being pay as you go, it is actually making the pool healthier. Because I'm able to stay in touch with my client systematically, whoever is driving, I have that data coming into me. I'm able to see that this person is only driving at nights or is driving very fast, and that data helps me, A, give customized premium, or it helps me improve on the behavior by saying, okay, I'll charge you 20 cents less if you drive 1 month without crossing 80 miles, and I'll pay you this. So in addition to just giving you pay as you use, this is incentivizing good behavior. And data helps you do that. The Toyota car is interesting. This is happening with almost all cars, but I wanted to give them example of Toyota because they were the first ones who did that. Toyota has, if any of you has a Toyota car, you'll see they have something called the G-Book. G-Book is basically a telematics patented solution, and a lot of companies are patenting that. At the back end, if you have an insurer, they'll pump your data to the insurer. So the insurer will have that data in some sense of how the car was behaving, how you were driving. So to answer your question of fraud, this kind of data really gives you a pattern and reduces client-related fraud in some sense. And you don't have to create the data, you don't have to invest in technology, other players are investing in the technology, you get that data. However, if you are always going to be the client of the data, you will slowly start to pay a lot more. I am here with the hope that you will go out and create and invest in some of this so that the insurance industry does not become a sitting duck to pay high prices to players like Metromile or Snapshot or other companies. Am I with you on this? Any questions on pay as you go, pay as you use? I just gave the examples of the car because it's very easy to give the example, but you start to see this in real estate, in home insurance. Has there been models in Colombia where pay as you use? Is any insurer doing pay as you use already? Show of hands? No? Anybody who's interested in doing it but thinks there will be a challenge to that? Regulatory, business challenge, distribution challenge, sales challenge? Any challenge? There has to be some challenge. No? No? I'm stuck. Help me understand. Do you think pay as you use is useful for your industry? Do you think there's a client? In the Colombian context, help me understand. Who would your biggest chunk of client be? Is it rural? Is it urban? Is it the shipping business? Is it, what business in Colombia do you think would use a pay-as-you-use kind of insurance or benefit from it? Insurers in the room awake? No? The transporters, long-distance transporters, truckers?
Transportadores de larga distancia. Yes, transporters, cargo transporters. Also import-export businesses.
Marine? Yes, marine.
Marine.
How big is the marine and transport business as a percentage of business? 20%, 30%? 20?
I don't know.
Smaller? Okay. So that was pay as you use. Those were the two typical distribution model I wanted to highlight on. I'm going to move on to back office.
Excuse me.
On automotive, the risks by usage that are being covered are, for instance, auto accident risks, third-party liability. However, if the vehicle is stopped, there are also risks present. Who covers those risks when the vehicle is parked? Are they subject to a different coverage?
For example?
Say that you're parked and there's an earthquake, there's a tree falls on it, there's an
Right. So that's an amazing question. But if you look at motor insurance, a large part of the premium that the insurers charge is actually towards accidents on the roads. The catastrophic events, as we know, are low probability events. So the percentage of premium allocated for catastrophic covers are really low. So you could still, which is why the products are in two parts. You pay a bulk premium, small unit, just to buy that insurance, which covers your car or your truck or your bus or your ships or your boats through the risk period. It could be 365 days. Now that's a very low premium, about 1/8 of what we charge. It's not 20% less, it's 80% less than what we traditionally charge. These are really, really affordable products. But you add on a small cost every time you drive. So yes, catastrophic events are still covered, but accident third-party covers, those kind of ones, you get to pay only when you're driving. Okay. How are we on time? I mean, I have about 15 minutes. Okay. Has this been too long? Are you guys sleepy already? No? Okay. I know it's difficult after lunch. I promise you the lunch was so amazing. I was like, oh. Okay. Let's do, this is the missing middle. I know this sounds, sorry. Oh, yes, please.
You were asking also about the regulations, whether there were any obstacles for offering insurance of this kind. I don't know. I think that perhaps in terms of reserves, you would need to reform the regulations, because these are hourly or insurance or by the minute or by the day. And of course, the maturities will be lower than what the current regulations contemplate on your technical reserves, basically. No necesariamente. Or how does it work where it does work?
You are assuming, and insurers in the room will be able to correct me if I'm wrong, when we are buying or selling an insurance for a car, we are assuming in our books that the car, even when it's parked, this was really bad data management by the insurers, by us. We were assuming that this portfolio is way more risky than it was, because we were assuming once we issue a car insurance that it's perennially driving. I mean, our data showed us the probability of loss is X, but we weren't factoring the fact that a lot of them are not driving. So I do not think your capital reserves actually go up, because you were providing a more blunt, big black chunk of a black hole of an insurance cover by saying, for me, you are driving always, you're always covered. Even if you're sleeping, you're driving. I'm going to charge you for your sleeping, and you're staying at home and you're going to work. I'm going to expect you driving your car always. That is what insurers assume when they allocate capital, and that's reflected in the cost of the product. Now, with more data, we have more information, so we are able to differentiate the time that we are actually, our portfolio is at risk, which is on the road, versus when it's not on the road, which is when we are not risky. And we are transferring some of that knowledge-based incentive to the client, because we do know that when it's parked, it may get hit by a lightning, but the probability of that lightning is really low than getting hit by someone or hitting someone on the street. Did I answer your question? No? I do not think I have to, sorry.
No, perhaps the concept of risk reserves may be different. So when you receive the premium, part of that premium needs to be put away, so to speak. I'm not being very technical, but there's a regulation that says that when you should keep more, keep less. When it's by usage, I don't know how much should you put away. I don't know how the models work elsewhere. That's my question.
Is there a regulator in the room who wants to take that question? I will let the regulator answer that question, because discussions are way more important than anything else, or crazy, boring PowerPoint slides. There are, in my understanding, from the countries I have operated in, and that's about 7 and not a lot in Latin America, the regulation requires you to pay the premium up front before you can actually be insured, right? But the fact that these are really good connectivity, and it's like a credit card relationship. So the moment I start driving, automatically my credit card starts getting billed in some sense. There's a wallet in between. There's a financial wallet in between that makes that payment. Also because we have Metro Mile and in between, and Spotlight is a product of the insurer. So these wallets are created by the broker with the insurer on behalf of the client. So there is upfront capital that is in some sense paid to the insurer to take care of the regulation as that happens against the pool. I have 80,000 people who have bought Metro Mile insurance from me, and I have Progressive as an insurer at the back end. As the intermediary, I pay up some capital, assuming 20% of my members will be driving today. So for that, I have already paid up. So in some sense, on getting premiums out there before I cover is already done. But I agree with you, the most critical enabling part here is this financial channel and the intermediary, which is doing that, in being able to pay up the premiums fast.
Tengo una pregunta.
I have a question. How difficult it is to achieve a premium based on the information that is generated by the devices on the cars? How do I quantify the information that is provided or collected by the devices inside the vehicles? How that is turned into a premium figure?
That's such an interesting question. You have a traditional motor insurance price that you already charge to your client. You have that number. What you do is really go back. So there are two types of data. You already have your historical data with you, which gives you a sense of the probability of the catastrophic events and what your product would have been if you only charge for catastrophic events. You take that price and that premium and you offer that to the client by saying, I am giving you car insurance at the lowest cost, but what you're only taking premium for is the catastrophic event. So that is step one. First premium that you will price is based on the catastrophic low probability, not road-based, park-based premium that you put aside and you charge your client. That's step one. Step two is actionable information that I'm getting over time. So Metro Mile does not insure you from the day you join Metro Mile. It takes about a 60-day lead in which at times they use a gadget, which gives you a lot more data about the driver as well as the car. But many times they don't use a gadget. It is plugged into the data. It's called telemetrics, but it uses data of the car to tell me how the client is behaving. And that is updated data. If the car meets with an accident, I get that data immediately. At times, it's a mobile-based app. So what you're doing is you're only trying to see how much is this client driving. If I'm a woman who is going to office and only driving in the morning once and afternoon once, whereas compared to a truck driver who's forever on the road, once you get that pattern, it's relatively easy to calculate how risky my behavior is going to be versus your behavior. Because as insurers, you have big data. You have historical data about client profile. What you need, this new data is much more actionable to customize it. I don't know how it translates in Spanish, but the word is tinkering. You already have the band you want to price, 20 to 30 age group, 30 to 40, truckers versus homeowners. You already have that band. This actionable insight, as we call, is only to tinker to get more precise. Did I answer your question? No, I'm not doing well with answers today. The regulator had to take that question on reserves. I'm sorry. I don't think the regulator is going to invite me again here.
Thank you very much for this bomb. No, the question, I understand perfectly the question and the concern behind the question, and is basically how do you make sure you are covering future expenses and future obligations with the money that you're getting, and the fact that you cannot calculate from the beginning how much money would you need to cover those future expenses that here in Colombian regulation we cover basically with the two main provisions that we have here. That one is for future obligations in general, and the other one is the money that you have to have ready in order to return to the customer in the event of an early termination. So the question is oriented to solve that concern. So the question here is, and once processed through the regulatory language, the question is, how do you price correctly these sort of products when you don't have the certainty of how much money do you have to get into your pocket in order to comply with these provisions?
Right. So yes, so you will not have the benefit of knowing the pool that you will have. You will not know how many people you will not know. Like mandated insurance, you know X percent of Bogota has no choice but will come to me. I can be a lazy insurer. I used to be one, so that's directed at me. But you do know, but you don't have any external risk out there. If I did not switch on my Metro Mile and I went driving, the insurer has no risk. You did not cover them. That's not your risk. You only cover, it's on-tap insurance. Only when you switch on the tap am I covering your risk. So while I do not know the size of the pool, I also do not care when you are exposing yourself. So the risk from a client health point of view is under insurance at times, because they may at times drive without switching that on. That can be another regulatory question to debate about. Having said that, will it dramatically shake up the insurance industry and have us think more about motor insurance, on which we have not innovated, have not brought any inefficiency, have been very lazy? And the answer to that question is yes. We have largely depended on the government mandating motor insurance, and we're sitting back and getting free money in some sense. And things will shake up. Yes?
How long did it take you? How long did it take you to have a certain data to fix a price per mile? Because you said we have a historical database that based on which we calculate the fee, the premium. How long did it take you to have consistent data and based on that establish an appropriate cost per mile? Second question, you say that always that the person, whenever the person wants to activate the insurance, it takes 60 days without cost to analyze his behavior of driving, and then that is when you start charging. Is that right?
So that's how Metro Mile launched its product. Now, nowadays, you just can start your Metro Mile cover, just go online and can start. When they were designing their product, they took time with every client. They wanted to be careful, and they wanted to get that initial data. So that was your first question. I'm not sure I got the other question. How do you... Right. A lot of it is really just massive amount of data that they already have, or insurance companies in some sense already have, so it's much more customization. But also it's just generic data about accidents in a geography, in a certain client profile. So they started with generic numbers, and what they have achieved now is greater and greater efficiency. I think the opportunity to watch out is the probability of accident that they're reducing by saying, oh, you've been driving for 8 hours, you should take a rest, we will increase your premium. You will not take a rest until somebody tells you that for the next hour, your premium cost is going to go up. So they are forcing good behavior. I think that's an important part to consider as to how we used to be just players who came in after the shock has happened. Here, insurers are coming in to reduce the probability of the shock when they will have to pay out through a carrot and a stick approach. Okay, I have only a minute and about 7 slides. So we'll quickly go through the missing middle. How do we go about it? Digitization of brokering, I think that's important. I will not talk about mobiles. That's something that has been touched upon. We'll have other speakers talk about it. There are a range of players who are acting simply like a mobile app or a solution. Finance Fox, NIP, Clark, GetSafe, a lot of them are copycat models in the sense that GetSafe and Clark are not really very different. I hope you just take notes and read about them later, because I don't have a half a day to run through them, but it's interesting to see what Finance Fox and NIP, both relatively similar models, have done. They are brokers that you work with, but they have digitized the whole process and built substantial efficiency for the client. And while I work in micro-insurance, these are solutions which are much more mid-tier solutions. So if you are insurers focused on the high-end and middle-income Colombians, you should be listening to this. So this is what they are. They're just doing better policy management and they're giving insurance advice. But the key here is they are simplifying the boring communication, making it easier, and they're giving it for free. How are they earning? They're earning at the back end from insurers, because insurers did not go out and simplify those processes. Here we have a range of aggregators who are doing this for companies, to help them manage the insurance for the clients better or the employees better. They're doing this for individual clients. And so they're digitizing the process. They're helping you with a price comparison. The sales are simple. The claims are simple. Finance Fox will intervene in the process and negotiate with your insurer so that you have a payout. And because they are becoming large and large, insurers tend to listen to them. So in some sense, they are aggregator of clients, but they're also building process efficiency at the back end of insurance companies that should happen, like paper management, like comparison of different products. It's very interesting. I'm not spending time on this, but I would urge you to look at it. If nothing else, you don't need to collaborate with them, but you have to. Of these 5 things listed here, think of one thing that you will internally do in your back office, so your processes become more efficient. If they are simpler, if you can handle more bulk, you can scale easily, because every time you add a client, it doesn't cost you $8, it costs you 20 cents. So that's why you need to do it, not for the client, but for yourself, in some sense. If you don't, there are players who are already doing it. And because these are players who are hugely capitalized, the speed at which they are coming into emerging markets is not funny. Last year, I was at the International Insurance Society conference, very New York, very old money, 3-piece tuxedos, velvet. And I saw a very nervous group of American insurers. They rarely get nervous, they're very rich. 1 year later, all the things they were nervous about was happening in the US. And I see that a lot in Africa, and I start to see that in Latin America. The opportunity is Latin American insurers can actually do a lot of this. You don't want a disruptor to disrupt if you disrupt yourself. This is an example from India, very different example. India is 1.2 billion. We collaborated with the Ministry of Labor. Now, India does a lot of things wrong, but at times it gets it right. This is an example of getting it right and how, at scale. So the Ministry of Labor offered a social insurance program. It was an experiment. They knew nothing. Ministry of Labor doesn't talk to Ministry of Health. I don't know if that happens in your country, but in my country, no ministry talks to any ministry. But they wanted to give a health insurance, and we have about 350 million poor households. They did 2 things. They started to issue biometric identification cards, so that was one technology at identification. And the second thing they did was a centralized tech backend that they had. That's all. And they then went out to bid by saying, we will pay premiums, insurers and TPAs bid. And today, 8 years later, this is the world's largest social health insurance program. And on a daily basis, the insurer, the government is able to see where the client walks into a hospital, largely because of technology. Premium costs that the government had benchmarked at about $15 have collapsed to $8, at times to $7. Really affordable, partly because of the scale, but a lot because of the technology backend system. So while a lot of excitement may be around the Apple Watch type of gadgets, I believe and I have seen that tech backend solutions are the most important investment that you need to make as insurers to scale. I have worked on this program for about 7 years, and for the last 22 countries I have only presented this program. So anytime you want to know more about this, please write to me. I can talk about it at 3 a.m. at night because it's so wonderful, because we all thought it would fail and it didn't. So the scale is massive, and this is what they used basically, a centralized MIS. And I urge you to think of those kind of solutions. That was just the trigger, and massive amount of large health insurance programs have happened because of that. We have insurers, TPAs, all involved, a lot of private and public players. But the tech platform allowed the government to get the insurers to collaborate with hospitals, 12,000 of them, private and public. And every time, as a client, I walk in with my biometric card, which is a cashless card, I swipe at the front end. Because it's digitized and it's connected, the central system gets an update. It allows insurers to control fraud, because I know that the client is in the hospital, I can make a check. But it also manages portfolio, gives me greater transparency. And because the data is in the card and the system is at the hospital and the insurer is getting an update, it's portable. I don't know how many Colombians migrate, but there's a lot of in-migration that happens, rural to urban, rural to rural, rural to US. I mean, there's so much. This allows portability. You get to keep your client. So if you're in an economy where remittance is important, portability is very important, then you should think of centralized MI systems. Any questions on the most important part that I rushed through on the core MI systems? I think these are obvious. People don't talk about it. I wanted to spend the time to talk about it. I'll do 2 more minutes on products. Alejandra, what's your sense? Do we have the time? Oh, no, 2 minutes. Okay. Are you guys sleepy, still in the room? We're good? We're good? Okay. Thank you. How do we find the client? How do we keep the client? Individualized products, simple products, inexpensive products. You know this, I'm repeating it. And then we'll talk a little bit about the exciting stuff, which is about the wearables and the gadgets. We have to digitize our legacy systems. There is no escaping that. There are tech aggregators who are coming in, they are using machine analytics, and they are giving simpler products. These can be very slim products that they're offering. They can allow price comparison, and this whole machine learning bit is really exciting to the amount of business intelligence it can give you on what kind of products, what to cover, what not to cover, who to cover, what not to cover. Once you start looking at it, it would seem, let's see what insurers traditionally do. We look at historical data or what has happened, and then try to figure out, in case of a shock, why it happened. What we don't know when we give a product, to what she was referring to, is we don't know what will happen. I mean, because the Halley's Comet comes after every 84 years, doesn't always mean that new comets will not show up. We are ensuring and designing our products with historical data of in how many years the Halley's Comet comes. And especially for people who are into agri-insurance or catastrophe insurance, we do know that the climate or the very nature of things are changing. So with machine analytics, we are able to forecast better. And if nobody else knows that, insurance, which is a futuristic business, right? We insure the future. We should get more of that, and that's very critical. We did something with Fino and HDFC Ergo with Mera Doctor. It was a simple HospiCash product. But what we used was something that we took from Latin America, which is a banking correspondent model. Fino is the country's largest banking correspondent model, which uses cash. So there was already data for us about the client that they were using for banking and savings. And we had an agent that was using it. We leveraged that, and we provided telemedicine. So our telemedicine is a push product. How many people think insurance is a push product, that clients don't run and want to get up in the morning and buy? Only one. To me, for like my 10 years of work, it has always been a push product, right? So when I pay you something and I'm not getting anything in return, nothing tangible, I don't want to pay you the next year. So our telemedicine is our glue. That is our tangible product. Every day morning, you can call my doctor for free, and we'll provide you health advisory. So it serves two things. It starts to give me data as to, is there fraud happening? I insured somebody else, but the neighbor is coming for my claims. And it gives second, it reminds you that I've insured you because I'm pumping health advisory at you. And third, I'm reducing escalation. If it's something that needs to be hospitalized, I don't want it to be delayed, that you'll ask for a surgery and I'll have to pay for the surgery. But what was most important was being able to partner with Fino, which had a large base of client for which it had historical data, because it was a banking correspondent and it was trading with them on a mobile money kind of platform. The other one that Alejandra said I should definitely mention, and to the regulator's question of how many of them are fly-by-night players, how many of them are regulated. Oscar is an insurance company like you all. It's not a broker, it's not a new intermediary. Now this is the part that I really like. Oscar provides incentives. So if I bought an Oscar health insurance, and if I wore one of those, Fitbit kind of wearables, and I went out for a run, and they got the data, for every day I ran, they would pay me $1 back from my premium, capped at $240. But I'm just saying, if I want to cover a large part of the population is obese, a large part of the population will become, not just in developed countries, in developing countries. India is like a diabetic time-ticking bomb. So insurers are freaking out because people will get hospitalized. There is no escaping that. Health insurers know this. I have worked in health insurance so much, I know this. I have to do everything I can do to keep you out of the hospital, because that is really the big shock for me as an insurer. So what Oscar does is really incentivizes good behavior. So you go out for a run. The other interesting thing is a South African company that got bought out called Vitality. Vitality tracks if you buy healthy food, if you buy a fizz drink, if you buy a Pepsi or a cola, they'll track that. But if you buy fruits, they will incentivize. They'll make the fruit cheaper by 20%. Guess who bought Vitality, which has nothing to do with insurance? It is about buying food. It's a grocery business in some sense, right? Home delivery grocery business. An insurance company bought out Vitality. Just to give you a sense about what's happening out there. How Oscar is working. It has a tighter network, very focused products, provides generic drugs, provides telemedicine, and is able to give these slim solutions like a cancer package or an HIV positive package. Actually, a South African company has an HIV positive package. Oscar does not. That was just an example. But it also is trying health maintenance. For people who are into health insurance, I would really recommend to spend some time and track that company, Oscar. There's a lot for us to learn from how they are disrupting the traditional health insurance business. I would have liked to talk about climate insurance because catastrophes are happening and will happen much more. But I'm hosting a workshop, I think day after, so I'll talk more about that then. But very ripe for technology. You all are exposed, as are your clients, and we don't even have those products. So technology there's no excuse as to why. We did South Asia's first climate insurance, which is now an innovation recognized by the UN. And I'm very keen that similar models happen. But the only way we could do this was because we invested a lot in the flood risk model, which is again technology and data. Once you make that investment, you can develop more products. Catastrophe insurance is going to grow. There's a lot of aid in that business to get started, and I think developing countries need more of that. Just quickly on wearables, this is how wearables look. For cars, for health, for homes. They're all coming. A lot of these, these smoke detectors, these health data, heart data, BP data that is getting tracked. It's interesting that most of these gadgets, the investment into these companies have come from insurance companies. Just goes to say where insurance is going. It's a little out there. I'm anticipating the car insurance, car gadgets will come to Colombia before the health ones come, but they all will. In summary, please move away from the green box, which is what happened, what did it happen. This is how we do business now. Let's move to the blue box. What will happen, what should happen, and making it happen. What should happen? They shouldn't get hospitalized. I will make sure they don't get hospitalized. I think that's where insurance is moving, and we need to get there. Don't worry about disruption, innovate, be part of the innovation. This is us. We do a lot of market research and impact research and policy advocacy, and we'd love to collaborate with you. Thank you.